Hello and welcome to the Memory Capsule podcast, where we interview members of the Pokemon trading card game community. My name is Rafal Gladys. Each week, we'll be speaking with our guests about their background with Pokemon TCG, how they got involved with the game, and give them an opportunity to share their love of the game. Today's guest is Alex Schemanske. While he's perhaps best known for winning EUIC 2023, Alex has a litany of achievements dating back over a decade. He's a consistent Day 2 competitor with over a dozen regional top 8s. Alex is also known for innovating the Pokemon TCG, having success with unexpected decks and pushing the metagame to its creative limits. Alex is now also the owner of his very own Pokemon TCG store in Michigan. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, we're back up and running after almost a year, hoping to get some good conversations going. If any of our listeners are maybe meeting you for the first time, is there anything I might have missed in the introduction that you'd like them to know about you?
I don't think you missed much there, no.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll get started with kind of the question that we ask basically all of our guests, which is just what is your favorite card of all time and why?
Favorite card? Yikes. Would probably have to be like, I don't even know, something stupid like it's gonna be something weird like Dusknoir from like Black and White era. But I'm sure there's a better answer than that.
Why did Dusknoir come to mind?
It's a card that enables so many weird gimmicks. Back when expanded was a thing.
For anyone who doesn't know, what did the card do? Why was it?
Uh, it moves damage counters on your opponent's side of the field, however you like. So just kind of like enabled some weird spread decks and like checkmate spots.
For sure, and there is an expanded deck that you were able to get a pretty solid finish with a couple years back, and we'll get to that when we when we move a little bit through the conversation. But it's definitely a card that enabled a lot of pretty fun interactions. Just going a little bit back throughout your history as a player, how did you first get involved with Pokemon TCG? A lot of people might know that you play with your mom, play with your brother, Christopher. You have a whole family thing going on with Pokemon TCG. How did you and then your whole family get involved with the game?
It was actually really random. Like we were on vacation with one of my friends from like elementary school. We were 9 or 10 years old, and just randomly, the idea to play Pokemon tournaments just like popped up, and then we went with it, and we were actually good at it, so we just kept going. Um, Kind of just spiraled out of control from there.
Now it's your whole life.
Yep.
Yeah. So for some context, like what time period was this?
Oh, that would have been like 2009, maybe 2010, maybe early 2010.
Okay. Do you have any memory of like your first like events? Because that was still like back when it was like Battle Road, cities,
Yeah.
states.
Yeah, so we actually like really conveniently started right at like flip of the season. So we got to start out with like pre-releases into Battle Roads, into cities. So like we just got like kind of like the regular framework back then. So like it didn't feel like we were in the middle of a season because we weren't. So like I was junior, so fake events kind of, but like I wasn't playing a real deck. Half the room wasn't playing a real deck. Uh, there was no real information out there, so like lists weren't really publicly available. So just kind of played whatever we wanted. At some point, I switched to playing real deck, but for a while, it was just like, what random card can I throw in with Mewtwo level X and have it make sense or not make sense in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think the fact that there just wasn't as much information is definitely kind of a big difference between now and then, for sure. Especially for younger players. I think a lot of younger players now might have coaching from older players and they have access to Limitless and things like that. How were you able to grow as a player and get the information you needed to improve?
I mean, a lot of it was probably just through like having Christopher there, like constantly had access to each other for testing. So when you have at least two somewhat competent players together, like they probably grow together. And like the juniors at the time in Michigan, like maybe by today's standards, aren't like anything like to write home about, but it was a competitive area. we had plenty of people who like showed up and at least like knew what to do with the game. The whole Midwest area just kind of like had a group of people who were good at the game. So it was just constantly seeing those people and playing against them that kind of just got me better. Uh, I don't know if there was anything like really that stood out though, because just kind of always have been decent at card games. So I probably started ahead.
When I was trying to kind of do some research for the episode, I did find out that you got top 8 at Worlds 2012 was that in juniors?
Was in juniors, yeah.
Okay, that's about as far back as the research could go. Was that one of your kind of your first big finish, or was there other stuff before that?
I think I top four at state championships before that, but other than that, like there weren't many opportunities for big finishes. So there were like 2 or 3 regionals a year and then nationals. Uh, I started 5-0 at nationals and blew it. So yeah, because I think that was my second year playing. The first year really should not count. I almost made worlds, but probably should not count that. Um, that was the first year like we were actually like trying at the game.
So then that top 8 Worlds run, could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, actually started with nationals. I played this somewhat off meta like Tracky and Eel Trick deck. I started 5-0, so like obviously the deck was good enough to have a good run. So I just kind of stuck with it. And I went like 5-2 at Worlds. It was top 16 because that's how we used to do it. I was 12th seed, won my top 8 match, won my top 16 match, and lost my top 8 match to one of the Tracky and Mewtwo Japanese kids. Terrible matchup, but just kind of like that placement set the stage for the rest of everything. Because all of a sudden, we have access to 8 tropical beaches. um, so, kind of have tropical beach for the rest of my life without paying for them.
That is definitely a nice little thing to get from that World Championship finish. Um, so we can then, I guess, on the topic of Tropical Beach, then move forward to that subject a little bit. There is a lot of decks that just throughout all the research, I saw that you played a lot with your brother Christopher. Things like Primal Groudon, things like Metagross, a lot of decks that needed things like Tropical Beach. um, what is it about that card that you find so helpful, especially when it comes to the expanded format and the strength that it offers your decks?
Right. I think the real thing is there are a lot of decks where you don't really care about attacking in the early game. Your whole goal is to like set up your board and just kind of checkmate from there. So like Groudon, a lot of the time you had Wobbuffet, slowed your opponent down. Didn't really matter to you, but you got to sit there for a couple extra turns just drawing cards with Tropical Beach. It's basically just like a consistency card that isn't a supporter, and you can use at any point basically. Drawing up to 7, kind of very good.
Specifically, when it comes to the Primal Groudon deck, could you tell us a little bit more about that deck? I think you and your brother have among the highest finishes with that archetype, and I know when I first started playing the game, and I would kind of go on Limitless, look at some old decks, I would look at Primal Groudon, and that was definitely a deck that at first glance I would look at it and go, what exactly am I looking at here? What is the point of this deck? What is it's Wobbuffets, it's Groudons. It has a huge energy cost. Could you tell us a bit about that deck, how it functioned, and why it was so good?
Yeah, so that deck basically, you would sit there with a Wobbuffet active, hopefully. Bench your Groudon EX turn 1. Most of the time in that format, it's not getting Lysandre'd or Gusted, whatever you want to call it, on turn 1 to get knocked out. And once you evolve with the Primal Groudon, it can't, it has Omega Barrier, so I think it's all support. I think it's supporters. It's all trainer cards. You prevent those effects done to that Pokemon, so it can never get gusted up outside of like an ability. And I think was Stealthy Hood back then? No. Um, at some point, some lists played Stealthy Hood and expanded to avoid that. But like you kind of just sat there on the bench with 1 or 2 Primal Groudons, attaching energies as you can, beaching to refill your hand, and Like you would swing, focus sash would prevent one shots, and you could either go like scramble switch into another Groudon, max potion that the first Groudon, puzzle of time for scramble switch again, and you have a Groudon with a sash, full HP, swinging again. Um, you can obviously set up your second Groudon in the background or your Regirock because it also has a Mega Barrier. And it's kind of impossible for anything in the format to easily deal with that. Like I think what we lost to in that event was like Azul's like Lorantis Vileplume or something, which just a bad matchup because grass.
It's conveniently the one type that beats
right. So like, and you can't play items, so Sash you can do. So it's just kind of like we only lost to the hard counter to the deck. So the deck is just very checkmate game like scenario. It's very good at that.
And there was a regional where you and your brother played each other in top 4 with Groudon, right?
Yes. Was
that the one with where Azul won?
Yeah.
How did that go? Had you and your brother like hit that high at a regional before?
Not previously. I lost the matchup because he played the Bunnelby and I didn't, so it was just kind of an auto loss. Because Bunnelby gets resources back and mills mine, so it's just kind of like, oh no, I lose. Because it's not like you can force Groudon into the active. So just it would be hit with Groudon, get out of active, like recycle, scramble, switch, max potion, do it again. Just kind of unwinnable from my side. And actually, later on in Mexico City, we also hit each other in top 4. Again, another kind of auto loss for me, but that's the only other time I've lost top 4 in the regional. I've only lost top 4s to Christopher. It's kind of a funny stat.
Wow, that's very funny. So you mentioned that it helped a lot kind of having him as a resource and both of you be just naturally having some talent towards card games. How did that kind of relationship between you two develop when it comes to like testing, preparing for tournaments? I know he also is a very successful player. Now he's best known for judging. Was there a point where maybe one of you was kind of the more successful one and kind of had to overtake the other one?
Briefly in like I guess my first year as a senior in 2013, he was more successful. That was just because aged up in the seniors, it was a difference at the time. Honestly, now I don't think it's much of a difference for juniors. But like he was the one who was like I guess more connected with the community. So like he would have other people he worked with that I would just kind of get absorbed into at some time. But I think past 2013, there was never like a point where he was really better than me, so much as just like in a different age group. Because that was the only year we ever played together outside of Masters.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So throughout all the years, you also are kind of very well known for playing with your mom Diane, who recently I think was it her first day too, like last season.
No, she actually day two'd like pre-Limitless era in Orlando.
How has that experience been, having like kind of the whole family involved with the Pokemon card game?
I mean, it's really convenient, first of all, but also just like it's very cool to just be like at Pokemon tournaments, and your mother is actually involved with like your friends in a good way. All your friends are like, "Oh, she's the coolest mom ever." So just like it's very nice having a family that does it with me. Very lucky to have that. So
Yeah, I've seen her reference as the best Schemanske on Twitter.
yes.
As you continue to kind of grow as a player, one of the big sort of narratives that grew around you is the fact that you had gotten a lot of top 4s, had gotten a lot of second places, but hadn't gotten that big like internationals or regionals win yet. Was there a point where you started to kind of feel pressure that you wanted to really get that win more than anything else?
Honestly, no. I just thought the second place thing was really, really funny. Like if you want to be stupid, I won Panama's special event back in 2019, which is technically regional level. There might have been 25 people, but I won. So kind of just like, I don't know, there was never really the pressure to explicitly win. I'm actually really good about that. I don't like stress about tournaments nearly as much as I probably should. And like once I make top 8, it's just like, oh, I'm here. Cool. So it's just like, I mean, that's probably part of why I didn't have a win, but I don't know. Kind of never felt the need to like pressure myself into winning. Uh, I have the runs. It'll happen eventually. Is kind of how it happens.
Is that a mentality you feel like you always had, or did you kind of have to grow into that?
I don't know. I think I've kind of always had that one. Like even so far back as what 2012 Worlds, I was like, oh, I made top 8. That's really cool. I don't care that I lost. But now I'm like, oh, I missed out on the trophy. But like at the time, I was like, oh, cool, that's fine.
Hmm. Is that something you'd maybe like recommend for other players to work on as kind of like a mental skill when it comes to maybe getting their first day 2 or their first cup win, kind of players who are still growing at the game?
I mean, probably one of the best mental states you can have in the game is play one game at a time without like real thought to the consequences. Like you stressing over your placement is never going to be like helpful. It might push you to be better at some point, but also like if you're enjoying the game and you're playing it with good people, you're going to get better anyways. Uh, so just kind of like I don't think it's like amazingly healthy to place a super high emphasis on your placements. Like obviously placements are good job, but it's not like they define you as a player most of the time. There are some players who define themselves by their placements, but it's not like it's some great validation to make your first day 2. It's just kind of like you are anyone can do it, but you also have to put in the effort and have like kind of a healthy mental state to do it, I think.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. I think a couple of years ago when I had a really good start at a regional, and I took one loss and I took another loss, and I think every loss kind of compounded, and every game I was playing worse and worse. And I think every player kind of has that experience of starting well at an event and throwing it because they let themselves get really frustrated, and that's something that everyone I think can probably work on.
Oh, definitely. I hear so many stories of, oh, I started 5-0 and then I got in my own head. Uh, like I'm really good about just like compartmentalizing those games. Like it's not a win and in, it's just another game.
So then, when it comes to finally getting that big win at EUIC last year, you were saying you didn't necessarily feel the pressure to win, kind of get that first big like majors win, but in general, winning an international championship is a pretty huge achievement. Could you tell us a little bit about that run? I know we were just getting into a new format after a rotation. New set had just come out. Things were really shaken up, and you came in with a bit of an interesting deck: Arceus Duraludon with Vulpix and Drapion. What was kind of your philosophy for preparing for that tournament, and how did it feel to finally get that win?
Yeah, I mean, so that event, honestly, like we didn't prep that much. I got delayed on my flight because of weather and getting struck by lightning. So I only got there like Wednesday night with almost no sleep. The group had actually collectively agreed that Arctura was not the play. The list was terrible. Like at the Wednesday night's list was like, oh no, this deck sucks. Um, but the alternative was Shadow Rider, and that was even worse. So by the time I got there, like Thursday, where it's like, okay, how can we fix this deck? I think we ended up throwing in like 5 more supporters, which was kind of the funny thing about that list is there were so many supporters. Um, and like it was consistent, so it was good for us. It worked. And then we spent most of Thursday not testing. It was great. So just like that event specifically, we were just like, okay, we take a decent amount of like just auto wins with this list. That's really good in like not like formats that aren't incredibly diverse. Actually pretty bad in like this current one. So like we auto won Lugia, we in theory destroyed Gardevoir. I have no idea what else we beat, but we just kind of like had good matchups around the board, and like I think Lost Tino was like the oh no, we hit the terrible matchup. Let's go next. Um, and like I think one of us hit Lost Tino one time, so like that was fake. So just, and then like, I don't know, winning the event did not feel real at the time. It was just like oh, didn't really think I'd win. Um, like actually once I got the finals, I was like okay, I'm probably gonna win. But oh, top 8, I was just like oh, Miraidon, I should lose badly. So I don't know. I never expected to win that one just because I had a 6-2-1 start. I was first seed in the top 8 because I was forced to play my round 15, uh, which actually very scary because it hit me in the Miraidon. But I just even after winning, I was like, huh, I guess I won. And like maybe like a month later, I'm like, oh, I won EUIC. Very cool. Right, right. Like I was just like, huh, I guess I won.
Once that
That's
check cleared, I'm sure you were like, oh.
right, right. I was like, huh, I have the trophy and the trophy card and like the champion mat, and people are talking to me about it. It's like I'm very bad at kind of acknowledging my own accomplishments at time. I was like, oh, I actually did this. Um, so it was just very like, at the moment it was like very surreal. Didn't not like just after winning, it was like a marathon to try to make my flight, which we ended up missing. But it was just kind of like constant like pictures, getting the prizing, leaving. Uh, so it was just kind of like, oh, I don't really have time to process this.
Yeah. Like you couldn't savor it the way that you kind of might have wanted to.
Right? Like I saw my friends for maybe 10 minutes before I'm like, oh no, I have to leave.
Did you feel a kind of a difference after that in terms of kind of your position in the community, like maybe clout. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but going from a player who was known as being very very talented and having a big name for himself to, but now you're EYC champion, you beat Tord. Did you feel kind of a difference in how you were seen in the community and at events?
Uh, yes and no. Mm, I definitely think like people kind of wait for someone to get that big win before like saying, oh, they're like amongst the best of the best. So like I guess in that sense, like people definitely raise their opinion of me. Locally, ironically, like a lot of like, oh, you won EUIC, you must be so amazing. I was like, yeah, I played Dora. Um, so just kind of like I don't know, like obviously opinions did change, but for most of the people, like most of the people I associate with, like and or like the better players of the game who've been around so long, they're like, oh, that makes sense. He finally won like a major. Like that was going to happen. Uh, so like that really didn't change. Uh, I think there were some amongst the more elitist players who actually started like trying to talk to me more, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's great. Moving on. Um, like there are definitely some people who acknowledge you more on your accomplishments, and like that those people definitely I think changed their attitude toward me a little bit.
Now, when you were talking about the decks you and your group were planning to play for EUIC, you mentioned Dura and you mentioned Shadow Rider, um, which, especially Shadow Rider, were decks that were not necessarily on anyone's radars. Like you said, the big decks being expected for EUIC were Lost Zone decks, Lugia, Guard of War. There was also Mew around.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah, the double Drapion.
right.
Yeah, there you go. Um, so those are kind of the big meta decks, and you were looking at Duraludon, you were looking at Shadow Rider. And you are kind of known for playing kind of either innovative decks or kind of unorthodox decks, typically not playing the number one deck in the metagame or trying to counter the popular stuff. What is it about that really appeals to you?
Uh, I think it's kind of just a combination of things. I'm historically very good at deck building. So just kind of, especially in new formats, there are a ton of opportunities to like exploit top heavy metas. So like into EUIC, there are like 3 or 4 decks that are real. Like you have to actually care about these decks, and like those kinds of metas are extremely easy to exploit. So that's how Arcdara came into existence, which is like, oh, auto win here, auto win here, auto win here. Um, like those kind of decks are just very like they're good for new formats. They're good for like having hot runs. Um, and like even Shadow Rider, like the I guess actually the goal at UIC was to stop our opponent from being able to play the game in any meaningful way as often as possible. Because Shadow Rider would like go path lock, special energy lock, and just big damage at times. So just like in new formats, especially like where we try to like focus those cool new decks. And the appeal to it is just I don't know how to like word it. It's not something I do consciously. I just always feel like I so I always start new formats on like stupid stuff. And then by the time I get to like, oh, maybe I should play the BDIF, everyone else like good has months on the deck. And I'm like, huh, I don't want to play mirror matches against these people. So I just don't do it. Actually this season I have been playing the meta stuff a little more often, but that's more just from a lack of time to do stuff. The appeal is definitely just like nobody's tested against this. Nobody knows what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Do you and you just sort of mentioned that in regards to like how the meta at UIC last year was very centralized around like 4 or 5 decks. Um, do you like how do you kind of gauge a meta in which that is a more appropriate choice versus maybe having to just play the meta decks?
Right. Hmm. I think like if you can tell that there is a centralized meta and like not a ton of fringe like tier 2, tier 1.5 decks that are gonna pop up everywhere, that's kind of the metas that are easy to exploit. You know, like if the top deck has like a very obvious counter, like Lugia had the obvious Duraludon counter. Uh, like that is something you look at and be like, wait a minute, if I can throw all these counters together and have it actually be functional, that's a good meta. Like that's a good meta call. But like using this current meta as an example, there's way too many just like playable decks. You can't beat everything, and you can't even really get close to beating everything like with a counter deck. Um, there's just too many things and too many ways around like the theoretical hard counters like Vulpix.
So then, for example, in a meta like the one that we're kind of heading into with the UIC this upcoming weekend, and this will be posted after and after NAIC. So for all we know, talking to the future champion, we'll see how it goes. But when it comes to metas like that, how then do you kind of make the calculation of what you're going to play? Do you then look at the meta, try to predict it, and say, well, these are the decks I'm willing to take matchup to losses to, as long as I'm kind of looking positively towards other ones, or are you just looking for the most consistent deck when the meta is so broad?
I think it's like a combination of both because obviously there are going to be decks that are more played for the meta. So you just kind of like you pick the acceptable loss matchups and make sure your deck actually beats what you're beating, like think you beat. Um, and if possible, like maybe try to like fix those other matchups. But if it's at the expense of your like good matchups, you don't bother. Um, like sometimes you just have to take the loss and move on. Like there's 2,500 people or something dumb in Masters. I'm not going to hit like guaranteed a correct meta share. I could hit 9 Gardevoirs. Like it's fine. So just like knowing when to just not care about a matchup, I think, is kind of important for metas like this.
As we said, like you've innovated a lot of decks, and one thing that comes to mind for me, we can kind of get to some of the older decks in a little bit, but one thing that's a little bit more recent is, for example, you playing Lost Box without Battle VIP passes. You got top 8 at Portland last year playing Lost Box with no VIP pass. It was just kind of like a nest ball heavy build. When it comes to innovations like that, and do you feel like there are certain things that until a top player has success with them, or until kind of you have like that argument for why it's good, players might dismiss it? Like, do you think that if certain players showed someone that list of Lost Box with no VIP pass, certain players might go, well, this doesn't look good, you're not playing VIP pass, this isn't the way to play it. But then you were able to really kind of prove that no, this is actually a successful way to build the deck. Look at how well I'm doing with it.
That one's actually probably a really bad example for me because I completely stole that deck. Nick Moffat played it to EUIC, and I was like, "Oh, this is funny. I don't have any testing time. I guess I'll play this." Uh, so no, like, I mean, the answer to your question is yes. There are times where like weird builds get acknowledgement after someone places them with them. Um, like, I don't even know if people really acknowledge the no VIP pass thing afterwards. Like, the deck kind of was mediocre. Like obviously good enough to have a top 8 run, but also kind of just bad. But that wasn't because there were no VIP passes. It was just because the deck was bad. So I mean, yes is the answer to that question. I think.
And I think you said it's a bad example, but I think it's kind of a good one because you found that because you saw another top player having success with it, right?
Right. Like I guess that is true.
So then, going a little bit back into your history as a player, looking at some of the interesting decks you've played, specifically, I think Expanded stands out to a lot of players as formats where you've had a lot of really interesting innovations, really great success. Things like the Regirock Sableye deck, Morpeko Dusknoir. That was the season I first started playing, like 2019, or recently got back into the game, kind of 2019. So I was seeing a lot of your results getting posted online and thinking, this guy is making a lot of really interesting stuff. What's going on with these deck lists? The one that I really kind of want to ask you a bit about is the Morpeko Dusknoir deck, because I was at Collinsville. That was one of the last events before everything shut down for COVID. And I looked at that list and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I need to test this more. And, everything shut down about a month later. Could you tell us a little bit about that list, how it came together? Because it was just so incredibly unique.
So this one's really funny. I was in St. Louis or Collinsville, whatever one you want to call it, and I'm just like, oh no, I don't have a deck to play. And my friend accidentally leaked that Morpeko Dusknoir existed, and I'm just like, huh, I guess that's funny. So I built it. I stole their list. Like it was their list, their initial list. They all like it was the St. Louis players. I think Andrew Martin was responsible for the deck. Like I got like the very early list. Like everyone else had made changes. Um, I didn't. I played a few games with it. I'm like, this is so funny. So I just played it. But like, yeah, I mean, there are just so many cool cards in Expanded. It's like I understand the thought process behind this deck. Like it's crazy. Uh, like do big damage with big HP things, spread damage, and Dusknoir it all around to have fun. Like just killing stuff. Like I think Expanded especially, like there's so many cards that like just exist. You can play the weirdest stuff and just do well with it because I mean you're playing the most powerful cards over what 10 years of time. Like of course you're gonna have okay shot of doing things. Morpeko itself was kind of a bad deck. I was the only one who day two'd with it out of like 7 people. I was the only one who didn't know what I was doing with it, but like there's just so many like things in Expanded you have to think about countering that sometimes you don't have to think. Like you just play the deck.
Like it's no use just overthinking because there's so many decks, so you just kind of play what you can.
Right. Like like obviously like you think about being like the best decks, but there's always gonna be like some person who shows up with like gimmick deck that's terrible. Like Rainbow Road is probably a bad example, but someone's gonna show up with Rainbow Road, and you're like, oh, I didn't counter that. And that's where like things where like Morpeko was funny because you're doing spread damage. Eventually, you're just gonna like win. Um, just a very weird, funny deck.
Have you looked at all into expanded over the past year or two? I know we haven't
No,
events in the West with it at all.
no, I'm terrified to look at that format. It looks scary.
It does. Do you think it would probably need any kind of changes or bans before it was able to be kind of a functional format in the West again?
I genuinely don't even know what the current ban list looks like, so I don't know if I can say that.
I honestly don't know if it's even been changed for a while.
I know Japan has updated theirs, so I assume there are changes.
Hmm. Yeah, the last one I remember is banning Scoop Up Net because everyone could just keep reusing
Yeah.
Shaman EX, and that's the last I remember of that. Is there any deck in particular that you're kind of most proud of creating or playing?
Um, see, NAIC 2018? Yeah, 2018. I was part of this deck creation, so it was Order Pad, like Buzzwole GX Garbodor. Um, my friend Wes and I were just in a call one night, like theorying this Buzzwole list with no, like, with nothing of like the normal, like no, like in Rock, no nothing, no max. Is there max elixir? There's no max elixir. It's just kind of like the funny deck that just is super consistent with an order pad in it. Like we built this list before. I think Madison Regionals 2018, and we had West Bubble top 8. I think Ian Robb got top 4 with it. Yeah, Ian Robb top 4 with the deck. And we took the list to Mexico City. Christopher got second. And then we took it to NAIC. I bubbled top 16, and like a bunch of other people just played the list. Like that was honestly like, one of the coolest things to be a part of. Just some off-meta Buzzwole variant that just popped up and had a bunch of people end up playing it.
And what made you guys kind of look at the way that Buzzwole was being played and think that maybe we could do this a bit differently?
Yeah, so like we were trying to make a consistent version of like just Turbo Garbodor. Like I think it was the hatred of a Max Elixir. Um, so like the deck itself was just like B string. Oh, the funny thing about the deck was no Ultra Ball. Back then like Ultra Ball was just like 4 of and everything, and we just didn't play any Ultra Ball. Nest Ball was like completely unplayed back then because Ultra Ball existed, and just kind of like we were like the first people to ever really play 4 Nest Ball Mysterious Treasure Engine to just find our Pokemon. Um, yeah, I mean it was just kind of like build the consistent funny deck. Order Pad obviously just was there to help find B string more often. Like we were just trying to make the deck as consistent as possible at getting Buzzwole swinging like for relevant damage. Because ability lock was going to be really powerful.
I was kind of taking a break from playing at this point, kind of looking at this like 2017 to 2019 time period for you. But one thing that does stand out to me is that you only have one finish with a Zoroark deck. Now,
So,
was that intentional? Were you always looking to kind of counter Zoroark, or did you have a reason to not want to play it back then?
um, I wouldn't say it was like, intentional. I just kind of that format was always Buzzwole for me. Like even Greensboro was like a little bit past like it was expanded, I think.
Oh yeah, yes, it was.
Yeah, it was expanded. Like that was past the prime of like even standard Zoroark. I think. Yeah, I think so. Maybe.
Yeah, that was like leading into like the NAIC right before it wrote.
Yeah, Zoroark was basically gone at that point. In standard. So like And the entire time Zoroark was in standard, I basically played Buzzwole. Like looking at my limits page, it's literally just like Zoroark pops up at EUIC 2017, and then I'm like, oh, Buzzwole, 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 Zygarde, Greninja. But like, it was all like I was very like, I think I'm the top Buzzwole player on Limitless just because I played it so much. Um, so it's like I played a ton of Buzzwole because I was really good at it. So I never really swapped to Zoroark.
And then for anyone who doesn't like necessarily know too much about the Buzzwole deck and how it functioned, like what stood out to it about it to you, and what made you like why would you say you were so good with it?
I have absolutely no idea. I think it was just a deck I kind of grabbed after EYC, and just like I kept playing it because I kept doing well with it, and I think it was just kind of like so. Like Rock has like Boss as an ability. It's like just the infinite ability to like bring things up. Rockruff had Retreat Lock, so there were like I was really good at identifying like the corner lock situations, which is retreat locking. So like I would just cheese out random wins with Rockruff. Um, and, like so I played Buzzwole I think 2 times after UIC. I top 16 OCIC and I got second in Charlotte. So like those 2 placements are obviously both very good. So I just kept going.
Another thing that kind of stands out just looking at Limitless page is that you went through like the kind of like 2-ish years of mostly playing Buzzwole based decks to almost every event you went to now you're a lot more kind of varied with the decks you play. It's every tournament's a little bit something different. um is that also something conscious? Did you kind of want to branch out as a player and play different things after playing so much Buzzwole, or is it kind of more meta dependent to you?
It honestly isn't conscious. Ironically, like almost all of the Buzzwole decks are, like, except for like the first 3, they're all different. Like one's Buzz Rock, one's Buzz Garb, one's Baby Buzz Garb, one is like Buzzwole Tapu Koko. Like once Baby Buzzwole showed up, like there were just so many different variants of the deck that I just played. Um, so like they're not all the same variant. They're all actually mostly different decks. Very weird. But no, like I think 2018 to 2019 was like the season where I just started like flipping on decks so fast. Um, because like there was no streak of 2 events I played the same thing in this format. Because like it looks like 3 Buzzwoles, but they're like Buzzguard, Buzz Coco, Buzz Rocktails. Yeah, so I don't think it was ever really a conscious decision. Uh, I think it has something to do with the fact that like information was like really becoming more readily available back then. So like it was more time to like make educated calls in the meta. Like information existed in like 2017, but it was definitely less like prominent. So like people were more apt to stick to the same deck more often.
So I think that's interesting you say that, because I do feel like, especially the last like season or two, where the meta has been very broad, and events have also just gotten so big. It does feel like a lot of kind of big name players are recommending that players just kind of stick on one deck, get it as good at it as possible. Just update it for the meta, but don't try to shift around too much. Well, you've kind of done a little bit of the opposite. Is that something you would recommend for players, kind of sticking to one deck, getting as good as possible, or do you feel like there's a point where players should be a little bit more diverse with their deck choices?
I really think it depends on like how you play the game. Because like I flip on decks because like I think I can do it. Um, like not everyone's going to be able to go, oh, I can play this deck at a regional with 2 games of testing and have a shot. Like that's probably not a smart idea for 99% of people. Um, so just kind of like picking a deck in this current format is just kind of like probably the correct answer for most people. just because there's so many decks. There's so many people. You're going to have like a decent shot of your run no matter what you're playing. So you might as well optimize like your one deck. Like get really good at it.
For sure, that makes a lot of sense. So, no, you don't have to like be humble about it. Like everyone, you're a very talented player. Like you can pick up almost any deck and be very proficient with it. What does kind of your average testing experience look like, especially when it comes to new formats? Like going into NAIC this upcoming weekend. As a player, you said you kind of start with the wackier picks sometimes. Do you have kind of a process you go through to prepare for events, especially when it comes to trying to counter the meta?
Oh boy. So usually kind of there's no real process. A lot of my testing is literally just talking in a group chat with friends being like, okay, does this idea work? And we shoot it down. Like maybe we have someone like play a few games with it. Um this season I've honestly done like a really low amount of testing. In part because this is kind of my off season. Like I was like, okay, I have my invite. I don't really there's no day two worlds. I don't care. Um so like I've definitely taken this season a lot slower. So less testing. There really is no process. It's just kind of a think tank.
Like it's not just like a giant group just like permanently testing on a Discord. It's more just kind of thinking through things, processing it. A lot of kind of the matchups going kind of through your head.
Right. Like I'm definitely very good at like theorying the matchups. Like a lot of the time I'm like, I don't need to play this. Like this deck is going to beat this deck. Why are we wasting our time?
Do you feel like there's a level of like just like your experience as like a veteran of the game that allows you to do that? Like you can look at a deck that's popular now and you can say, well, this is kind of in some ways similar to how a different deck interacted with another deck a few years back, and I see the similarities and the differences, and how these cards were good back then, and they might be different right now, and that might affect your ability to kind of make those calls.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just like let's say I look at Raging Bolt Ogrepon. That deck, full of two prizers, one prizer, is not going to trade well with other decks like that can spam one prizers. Like that's just how it's going to work. Like I don't need to test that. I don't need to test the Raging Bolt Guardian matchup because that matchup is free. Like Guardy should just never lose unless it doesn't play the game. Like I know Guardy might brick, but I don't care. Like I don't need to know that Guardy loses the game it breaks. Like that doesn't matter. Like that's going to happen no matter what I play. So why am I wasting my time?
For sure. Yeah, and it's something as simple as that. Like Guardy, a year and a half ago, like before Maridon had Iron Hands, was a very similar matchup. You had
Right.
prizers, and if Guardy bricked for 3 or 4 turns, yeah, Maridon would win. But if Guardy could just start functioning at some point, it was probably going to win the game.
Right. Like I think I can look at most matchups and just be like, oh, this is how it's supposed to go. Probably. Why do I need like unless I'm trying to like figure out how to beat a matchup, I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, I need to test this matchup where I could be like, okay, Iron Hands does this, I knock out Iron Hands, Iron Hands comes back, I knock it out again. Can they respond? Like that is like I think like, you should be able to calculate. Well, most people probably won't be able to, but like I can calculate like the odds of like winning that matchup like based on just like what they're playing.
As we kind of start transitioning then like away from kind of like the like meta discussions, I do want to ask you about like kind of some of your life stuff recently. You have recently started operating a card shop in Michigan.
Yeah,
Could you tell us a bit about that and how that's been going?
yeah. I mean, right now it's just like we go to a couple of card shows every month, and we have a TCG player store. It's really it. Like, kind of doing it. Buy and sell. Yeah.
What's the name of the store in case anyone's interested in getting your stuff?
Keycard collectibles. I think the Twitter handle is at Keycard Collect because collectibles was stolen.
Oh,
Whoops. Should have thought about that before we named it, but it's fine.
what kind of led you to want to start doing that?
Um, I don't know if there's like any like big moment. Um, just a couple of friends and I are like, oh, this is something we could do in our spare time. We all like Pokemon. We have the free time. Why not like just have something that we can do together as friends? And we just did it.
Is Pokemon specifically kind of the goal of the shop, or are you looking to kind of get into other?
It is currently Pokemon. Might branch out to other games at some point, but we like have the expertise in Pokemon, so like it's a lot easier.
For sure. Yeah, I think if you asked me to just start telling you if how good a Magic card is, I would probably would not be able.
Like, okay, I don't know. I don't even know how to look this card up.
Yeah, exactly. So how has that experience been so far? I'm sure it's kind of been an interesting experience, kind of going to like the card shows, collectible shows, things like that. How's that been going?
I mean, actually, it's been like I would call it a good experience. Like you meet people and it's like he honestly, our first card show was just kind of fun, just like getting to talk to people randomly. Like they come up and be like, "Hey, do you have this blah blah blah?" And like start a conversation. You're like, "Okay, cool. I'm learning about this person." Like, and it's like it was just kind of like fun. Um, like obviously there's going to be work involved. It's just, but at the same time, it's a good experience. Just like in a world where so much is like done through the internet, the face to face interaction is just so good. Like obviously you don't get that through TCG player, and TCG players are the most evil people on the planet. But like there's definitely there's a lot of like cool interactions that happen when you show up to these shows, and like people like tell you their life story because they're trying to sell their Pokemon cards. Um, yeah, it's always just cool. Like a lot of young kids, like just trying to like get into the hobby or like complete a collection or something. Maybe they just want to rip a pack. Like I probably like I can say this. We do very good prices on like sealed product and stuff. So like we're probably like the accessible vendor at a show for like sealed product or like loose packs. So the kids come to us, and like it's always just so cool seeing like the excited kid who pulls like the Pikachu or the Charizard. Like we sold a pack, and some kid pulled the Chase Card Charizard. I was like, okay, cool. Like he was so excited. Like that, like, being able to help enable that is actually very cool.
Have you noticed kind of a difference in terms of like the community of like kind of like the collector community versus the player community? I know the players, well, we there was a period where we kind of all hated the collector community because of all the scalping and stuff, but I know that's not the average collector. How is that kind of the difference between being mostly at tournaments, being mostly around competitive players who kind of want the cards that they want,
Right.
competitive, and now you know players might not know why a forest seal stone's worth $10, or collectors might not.
Right. That's actually like that is a good point. Like we'll be at these shows, like we have playables obviously, and they're like so much higher, and sometimes collectors are like, so why is this like $20 for I don't even know what the card would be for like for Iron Hands. Iron Hands, that is the perfect example. Why is Iron Hands $20? And then you get to explain like, yeah, the competitive game. And once in a while, like the conversation goes, oh, we both play Pokemon. Like we play the game, and like a lot of people find that like the collectors find that really cool. Um, and like just you can tell a different mentality. Like people will walk up to you and buy the most random card of all time, and you're like, huh, that's cool. Like you're collecting Shuckles or whatever. Like as a player, I'm like, oh, okay, Shuckle, move on. But like seeing what people are like interested in collecting is very interesting.
That is really cool. Do you have like any long-term goals specifically for your shop?
Long term, like there's no like concrete goal, honestly. It's just kind of something we started to have like kind of have an excuse to spend time with each other, like as friends, because like, it's so hard right now. Like, it is extremely hard to spend physical time with people without like any real reason right now. So like having that quote unquote excuse kind of makes it easier, and like you have a schedule to spend time with people like your friends, and at the same time you're in theory like building up a business. Like that is one of my friend, like one of the friends involved, like his hobby is I want to build businesses. like like that is just something he does for fun, so it's just like okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do that with a friend, especially, and doing a passion that you really, you really care about.
Right, and like we're all interested in Pokemon.
As we start beginning to wrap up, what are some events that you're planning to be at? Maybe both as a player and as a as a store owner. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, events wise, I'm probably gonna be at the IZs and Worlds, and like I think next season I'm back at most regionals. Obviously I skipped a few this season, but I think next season I'll be back. Um, Vending, I don't. There's not really any like specific things. We show up at like some Michigan card shows once in a while. Kind of, just kind of showing up to stuff. Basically, if it's Pokemon, like a big event or Michigan locals, there's a good chance I'll be there.
Anybody want to shout out before we start finishing?
Um, just the usual shout outs, like the whole friend group. There's too many people to name at this point, so you know who you are. It's great, good testing, or not testing in our case, but yeah, I mean, friend group, my family, just all those people.
And finally, if anyone wants to follow you, get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Um, Twitter is probably the best place at A Schemanske. I also run an article website at this point. Just search my name in Google, like just Schemanske in Google, and that is the fastest way to find it.
Nice. It's nice having like a memorable last name.
It is actually very convenient. Um, it is also inconvenient when your classmates Google you, but
Did they find out you were the EUIC champion?
oh yeah, that leaked in like 2 days. It was so funny.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Alex for being so generous with his time. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one, please consider giving the podcast a follow, review, or rating wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at memcappodcast. Or if you want to see me post about my TCG experiences, you can follow me on Twitter at RZGladys. Hope you have a great day, and thank you for listening.